Okay. So, es geht nicht dem Ende zu, aber in die letzte Session für heute. Und jetzt halt die Chance, die besten Plätze noch zu finden. Ich sehe da jemand mit Flammkuchen unterwegs sein. Das bringt mich zu dem Punkt, zu der vielleicht Frage, die im Raum steht. Wie lange gibt es was zum Essen heute? Da habe ich vom Catering die Botschaft bekommen, bis 10 Uhr. Also wir werden hier so in der Größenordnung 9:30 fertig sein. Und dann wird die letzte Gelegenheit sein, 10 Uhr. Und danach ist halt, zumindest was das Essen und Trinken angeht, Ende Gelände. Aber eben auch noch genügend Luft nach unserer letzten Session. Da haben wir 2 hier und den dritten, jetzt weiß ich gar nicht, wo ich hinzeigen soll. Da. Den dritten. Und den dritten da, genau. Den Tilo Schwarz, den Mike Rother und Jeff Leiker. Jetzt überlege ich gerade, ob ich die provokante Frage stelle, wer kennt euch nicht? Aber ich sage ein paar Worte. Tilo Schwarz, Autor, Kata-Coach, Co-Gründer des Campus for Leaders an der Hochschule Ansbach, war für die Festool als Werksleiter unterwegs, hat dort Kata als zentrales Führungsmuster eingeführt. Und ich glaube, das prägt wahrscheinlich und wirkt immer noch nach, würde ich sagen.
Vor allem mich, ne?
Wie?
Vor allem prägt es mich.
Ja, natürlich. Also ich denke, so mit dieser
absolut.
Erfahrung und das dann eben weiter zu nutzen. Mehrere Bücher zu dem Thema, Führung, Coaching, Toyota, Kata. Den Mike Rother.
Wer kennt uns nicht? Ich wollte nur sagen, großer Fisch, kleiner Teich. Bin ich in den Flieger gestiegen und da las jemand ein Buch von mir. Aber nur einmal. Only one.
Der diesen Begriff geschaffen hat. Sonst würden wir darüber nicht reden. Ich finde es sehr spannend. Ich persönlich nenne es ein Modell. Und das Modell war ja heute schon öfters ein Thema, jetzt eher im statistischen Kontext. Ich finde, es gilt aber für alle Modelle. Es tut den Modellen aber überhaupt keinen Abbruch. Von dem George Box, diese Aussage, alle Modelle sind falsch, weil es sind halt Modelle, aber manche sind halt sehr nützlich. Ich persönlich empfinde die Toyota Kata mit ihren 2 Standbeinen auch ein sehr nützliches Modell, Dinge zu beschreiben, weil das ist der Zweck von Modellen, Dinge zu beschreiben, die man halt so ja nicht greifen kann.
Was uns auffiel, ist, wenn man ein Modell hat, in der Academic World, denkt man, jetzt habe ich das Modell publiziert. Warum machen die Leute das nicht? Komisch, ich habe es ja gut erklärt. Da sind wir von der Uni ein bisschen abgeschieden und haben gesagt, so, wie kann man sowas übertragen? Und da kam dann eigentlich Kata dazu und Üben. Und die Übungsroutinen sind für Leute außerhalb von Toyota. Und wenn Leute nach Toyota reisen, sagen sie, wir sehen keine Kata da. Nö, die brauchen das nicht. Das war entwickelt für uns alle andere.
Ja, eben zu verstehen, was machen die denn dort, glaube ich, ist so.
Das war das Modell, genau. Und dann,
dieser Grundgedanke.
Genau, und wie kann man dann solche Fähigkeiten und Denkweisen entwickeln? Das war die zweite Frage.
Genau, und das wird auch jetzt das Thema im Kern sein dieser Session mit der Überschrift, ich glaube, die hast du formuliert, Wings for your Team. Führung im 21. Jahrhundert zu entwickeln, eine lernende Organisation aufzubauen. Das ist, glaube ich, eine der zugrunde liegenden Gedanken, wie wir es ja bei Toyota sehen und über dein Modell eben greifbar irgendwo zu machen. Und deshalb bin ich gespannt, was wir von euch dreien. Jetzt weiß ich nicht,
Zu Jeff wolltest du noch was?
wann wir... Ja,
Er kommt noch.
danke. Den Jeff Leiker. Ich würde ihn als Urgestein auch im Lean-Kontext benennen, mit seinen 14 Prinzipien unter anderem und vielen anderen Dingen. Ich würde für mich selber sprechen, dass er mich ein Stück weit, davon weiß er wahrscheinlich gar nichts, aber dass er mich ein Stück weit geprägt hat in meinem Verständnis, was Lean angeht. Und ich könnte mir vorstellen, dass es bei euch beiden ähnlich ist. Speziell so so glaube ich es zu wissen, dass ihr ja eine Stück weit enge Zusammenarbeit habt und dadurch eine Verbindung da ist, wo wahrscheinlich gegenseitige Beeinflussung, ich meine allein dadurch, wo wir jetzt miteinander reden, beeinflussen wir uns ja. Also man kann ja immer so wildes Wort Manipulation drüber schreiben. Das kann ich ja nicht lassen. Nicht manipulieren, wie mit Kommunikation und Verhalten, geht ja nicht. Und das aber eben aktiv zu machen, finde ich sehr spannend. Und da finde ich eben eure Bücher, Jeffs Bücher, sehr hilfreich, um ja, für sich selber dann zu überlegen, was steht da zwischen den Zeilen eventuell, was steht da vielleicht halt auch nicht. Sich selbst davon auch ein Bild zu machen, das ist für mich ein Wert von Büchern. Da gibt es diesen, ich habe jetzt, weil der Alexander Phrasenschwein hatte hier diese Aussage, Lesen ist Denken mit einem fremden Gehirn.
Ein Erstaunliches über Jeff ist, dass er Professor ist, aber immer weiter lernt. Das findet man nicht so oft. Ja. Also immer mehr, immer weiter. He's pretty humble in that respect. Und ja, wir tauschen uns dann gegenseitig aus.
Gut, und an der Stelle ziehe ich mich zurück und überlasse euch
Götz, danke.
die Bühne.
Ja, danke dir.
Okay.
Herzlich willkommen. Ich freue mich jetzt auf einen spannenden Abschluss mit euch. Meine Präsentation heute ist in Englisch, weil Jeff schon zugeschaltet ist, dass er uns verstehen kann und dass wir nachher auch mit ihm in die Diskussion kommen können. Ihr dürft natürlich gerne nachher Fragen in Deutsch stellen. Alright. Can you switch to, könnt ihr die Präsentation bringen? Ich drücke zwar. Super. Danke. All right. Who of you has the feeling that in your company, the team you work with, or if you're a consultant, the clients you work with, improvement is still too slow? Please show of hands. Wow. I have to change my presentation. I thought, you know, it's Lean conference, everybody would say, we're super fast. Who of you has the feeling that although we, of course, improve, we often fall back? Okay, and then a special question for those of you that are in a managerial role. Who of you has the feeling that your team could do so much more, be so much faster, but you are always the one that has to push, hold it together, and solve the problems? Slowly like this. So I guess we all have the feeling that speed of learning is more crucial than ever. And you know, there's a lot of talk about we need more innovation, we need more improvement, we need faster decision making. Well, I think underneath all of this is speed of learning. Because innovation, well, it's a result of learning, right? Improvement is a result of learning. Problem solving is a result of learning. So the faster I learn, or let's put it this way, the team that runs the most experiments and learns the fastest usually wins. Now, when I talk about speed of learning, here's what I mean. I think we often, when we try to reach challenging goals, when we start a new project, when we start a change journey, we tend to think like that. And we really would love if it would work. And well, we can be lucky, but often it doesn't. But we would just like it to be like on the left side here, that we can just make a plan and execute. Now, I think what we also all feel is that reality looks more like on the right side. And maybe today is just the right time to start a little bit more thinking like on the right side. How can we quickly test, learn, and adapt as we go? And that's why I think speed of learning is the foundation for everything else. A little trick, when somebody comes up with an idea, in my experience, especially in a meeting, we often tend to discuss the idea. Is your idea better than my idea? Who's right, who's wrong? And I started to change my behavior there. And I like to ask or say, great idea. How can we test it quickly? Increase the speed of learning. All right, so now you could say, well, but Tilo, haven't we been working on this for a long time? Götz, you mentioned the, where's Götz? He disappeared there. Götz, you mentioned the word learning organization. That's a very old term. And I think in many companies we've been working on increasing speed of learning already for a long time. And that's good. And thinking about it and observing it, I think we've worked on a couple of things. So one thing we've worked on to increase speed of learning is we've introduced methods and tools. So like here in the Lean community, we've introduced Lean tools, problem-solving tools. In the Agile community, we've introduced tools and methods to become more agile. Structured problem-solving. So I think we've spent a lot of effort. You could say we've sown some seeds of methods and tools. It's not wrong, it's good. Keep the methods and tools you've introduced. Also, I think the second field we've worked on is what I call structure and roles. So we've realized that an obstacle to speed of learning is the way we've structured our organization. Because deep hierarchy and silos make decision-making and learning slow. So we've created structures that allow for quicker decision-making, bringing decision-making to the front line. Smaller teams, interdisciplinary dynamic teams that can make decisions where things happen. Also, we've changed roles. We've introduced new roles like the value stream manager, maybe the scrum master, all kinds of supportive coaches. Now, are we happy? Are we satisfied with the speed of improvement and learning? Probably not. So I don't think these two fields are wrong. I think there might be one more we haven't talked about so much. And in order to understand this field, I would like to talk about three things which I think are important. Number one is habits. Number two is scientific thinking. Number three is coaching. Let's talk about habits here. I have a little challenge for you. There's some text here on the slide. It's not about the text, actually. It's about the colors. And I wonder, it's quite late today, if you can still do it. Can you tell me the colors? I can't hear you. Okay? Pink, sorry, that's the screen here. Pink. Okay, I see you can do it. Okay. Now, the world is changing rapidly, right? There's so many challenges coming at us from all different kinds of sides. And I think we've trained people to deal with that, right? Who of you has a Six Sigma training? Okay. Who of you has a Kaizen training? Okay, good. I like it. So I think if I change the challenge a little bit, you can do it. All right? Let's try. Tell me the colors. Sorry. No. Why are you so slow? Okay, I think you have not have enough training. We need more training. So welcome to today's problem-solving training. Let's start. You tell me the colors. Louder.
Green, yellow, red, white, brown, black, pink.
Okay, congratulations. Here's your training certificate. All right, so let's test it. Now, please go back to your workplace. Let's go. Okay, I think we need a different approach. I think we should start a strategic initiative. All right, team, welcome to our town hall tonight. I'm very proud that today marks an important step in our cultural journey because we're starting the second stage. And we're laying quality as the foundation of everything we do. Now, this is not a strategic initiative. This is a commitment to excellence in everything we do. This will determine how we work, how we make decisions, and set us apart in the market. And I proudly announce, as member of the executive team, the stage 2 of our cultural journey, which has the title, Quality is in Our Hands. Can we say it all together, please? Quality is in our hands. Let's build. Quality. Yes, we can. Okay. So after this amazing presentation by our CEO, I think you can do it. Let's try. Ralf, can I talk to HR, please? We need some. Okay. So what's happening here? What's happening here? We can train methods and tools. We can start a cultural journey. We can change structure and roles. It's not wrong. But no matter what we do, unless we also work on the existing habits and the thinking patterns, we will not get greater speed of learning. Because all the seeds we sow fall on the ground of the existing habits and thinking patterns. Because our brain jumps to what we know. Habits are stronger than any training. Habits are stronger than any structure or change in roles. The good news is we can change it. Because our brain has an amazing ability, which is called neuroplasticity. So I just want to share a very short video with you about this because I really find this amazing. Here we go.
Long ago, many scientists believed that the brain did not change after childhood, that it was hardwired and fixed by the time we became adults. But recent advances in only the last decade now tell us that this is simply not true. The brain can and does change throughout our lives. It is adaptable, like plastic. Hence, neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity. How does neuroplasticity work? If you think of your brain as a dynamic, connected power grid, there are billions of pathways or roads lighting up every time you think, feel, or do something. Some of these roads are well-travelled. These are our habits, our established ways of thinking, feeling, and doing. Every time we think in a certain way, practice a particular task, or feel a specific emotion, we strengthen this road. It becomes easier for our brains to travel this pathway. Say we think about something differently, learn a new task, or choose a different emotion. We start carving out a new road. If we keep travelling that road, our brains begin to use this pathway more and this new way of thinking, feeling, or doing becomes second nature. The old pathway gets used less and less and weakens. This process of rewiring your brain by forming new connections and weakening old ones is neuroplasticity in action. The good news is that we all have the ability to learn and change by rewiring our brains. If you have ever changed a bad habit or thought about something differently, you have carved a new pathway in your brain and experienced neuroplasticity firsthand. With repeated and directed attention towards your desired change, you can rewire your brain.
Isn't that amazing? We can rewire our brain. So now, before we start crazily rewiring, we maybe should be very clear of how do we want to rewire it. Or maybe we should start with understanding how is it wired today. So basically, our brain has this unconscious tendency that we gravitate towards what we know, to the experiences we've made, and the solutions that have worked in the past. So whenever we kind of encounter something new, maybe a challenging goal, maybe a new project, our brain has this amazing ability to kind of reach back into our suitcase of experience. And based on that, all of a sudden, things look a lot more familiar. And then we start kind of thinking, that's the way we do it. And we start making a plan and execute. Now, while that can work, it probably does not work very often. So instead of this kind of pattern wiring in our brain, maybe it would be helpful if we acknowledge that we always have a threshold of knowledge. So experience from the past, or you can say gut feeling, is not wrong. But it's probably best used as a starting point and should be tested, so that we experiment, go forward, move our threshold of knowledge, test, learn, and adapt. And that is exactly what we call a more scientific way of thinking and working. Now, Mike, you've said when conditions are complex and dynamic, scientific thinking may be the best approach we have for navigating. And Tota Kata is a way of practice to develop a more scientific way of thinking and working. So let's come back to this picture here. Structure and roles, method and tools are great. They're not wrong. Keep what you have. But add a more scientific way of thinking to bring them to life. Now, how can we do this in an organizational context? And that is where the third thing I mentioned comes into play. So number one was, we have to understand that habits are stronger than structure and roles, method and tools. Number two is that probably we should work on creating and developing a more scientific way of thinking and making it a habit. Now, how do we do it in an organization? Well, that is where the third part, coaching, comes into play. Because scientific thinking is not our default way of thinking. Now, how can we change it? Well, I think that is exactly the point where Toyota has found maybe not a magic trick, but you could say a life hack for culture change. So I think what we've tried a lot is we've done classroom training. You've just been through a training. You even got a certificate, right? Color listing training, yeah? And I think, I don't know, but maybe you've experienced the same thing as I have. It's not difficult to get people enthusiastic in a classroom training. So Friday they go home and say, this is exactly how you should do it. Monday they come to work and their manager says, I know in the training you heard A, but in my department we do B. That's it for the training. So I think one of our challenges is that there is kind of a big separation between what we want to happen and train in a classroom and what actually happens in reality. And that is the life hack for culture change I think Toyota has kind of mastered, which is instead of separating these, combining these two by practicing a scientific way of working as part of daily work. How? Through managers as coaches. Now, why is it important that managers are the coaches? Sometimes I get the question, well, is it just managers coaching? No, peer coaching is wonderful. It's great. It's a super helpful thing. We can help each other. Awesome. However, if we want to develop a common habit in the organization, I believe managers must be coaches too. Now, let's look into this a little bit more. I think in many companies we have this kind of perception. We have an existing culture, we start a culture journey, and we want a new culture. Now, this is not going to work because culture is an outcome. And thinking about neuroplasticity, we now know, well, in order to develop or evolve our culture, we would need to understand what are the existing habits, what are the habits we want, and if we want a more scientific way of thinking, we know this transition here is all about building new habits. Now, building habits is changing behavior, and what is influencing how people think, act, and behave in an organization? I think there's many factors, but probably there's one that has the biggest influence, and I believe that is management behavior. Let's give it a try here. So I'll try it on the stage, a bit dangerous here, but you can stay seated. So if you could lift your right leg up a little bit like I do now. Come on. I want to see everybody do it. And circle it counterclockwise, okay? That's to the left. So this is a team member on the left side having a certain behavior, a habit, okay? Now the manager comes in, that's your right hand. Please lift your right hand. Come on. And draw a 3 into the air. What happens with your leg? Okay. Important safety notice, before you get up, do a 6. This will get your leg in order again. Okay, so that we don't have any casualties here. Okay, so what's the idea? Now, there's a connection between what I do with my hand and what my leg does, okay? So a 3 does clockwise, a 6 does counterclockwise. How does that connect with organization development? Well, imagine the manager comes in on Monday, says 3. On Wednesday, 7, Friday, 9. What's going to happen with the behavior in the team? Or imagine the frontline leaders says 3, department manager 5, CEO 17. What happens with the behavior in the organization? Okay. That's also culture. It's kind of, you call it flavor of the day. It's maybe not the culture we want, okay? So what does that mean? Well, that means if we want to develop a common habit of scientific thinking to increase speed of learning in our organization, we will need a common coaching habit for managers on all levels. A common coaching habit for managers on all levels, focusing on developing scientific thinking habits. And you know, this is exactly what the coaching kata is about. So the coaching kata provides a set of questions as a starting point for those that would like to learn to coach their team in a way like this. Also, it provides an underlying coaching model to upscale this kind of coaching throughout all levels of the organization. Now, this might sound daunting, so I don't want to leave you today just with this concept. Because what we also have learned about habits, and if you're interested in that, you can look into B.J. Fogg's research at Stanford University, that building new habits has 3 important ingredients, which is motivation, ability, and a trigger that kind of triggers this new behavior. Now, if we look at the 3, motivation, ability, trigger, we understand that there's not much we can do about motivation. Especially in the beginning, motivation will be low, okay? Now, we can work on the other 2. Ability, what can we do? Well, we can make it super easy. we can what we call create tiny behavior changes, tiny habits. Also, we can work on the trigger. We can trigger this easy, simple, tiny behavior every day. So for closing today, I want to give you a couple of tiny coaching habits you can immediately use with your team. And it's always going to be trigger, new behavior. So the first trigger is, do you have meetings in your, yeah? You have meetings? Okay. Okay, good, meetings. So here's a way, a tiny coaching habit to bring scientific thinking to your meetings. If you have meetings, you probably also have meeting minutes. Maybe, yeah? And we usually track who does what until when. Next time we track, is it done? Now, I think this is super cool for adding scientific thinking and a bit of reflection and learning. Here's how you do it. Keep your meeting minutes. Write down, like always, what we'll do, who will do it, when we'll do it, and then ask one more question. What do we expect? You can write that down in your existing form. You don't have to change the form. Because this sets you up for a little bit of learning and reflection next time, where you can ask, not only, is it done, but also, what did we learn? So here is a tiny coaching habit you can use immediately in your meetings. Before you ask, what do we expect? Afterwards you ask, what did we learn? Okay, here are a few more. Just pick one, start with one, do it for 2 weeks, and then tell me what happened. So, first one, we already talked about that. When we define a step in a meeting, I will ask, what do you expect? Second, when we check a step, I will ask, what did we learn? If you don't like these for starting, here's another one. Trigger. Have you ever had the situation where somebody has an idea that is completely different from your idea? And then you go like, I don't think this is a good idea. Here's the alternative. When someone proposes an idea that is different from my idea, I will not say, no good. I will say, great idea. How can we test it? Alternative, tiny coaching habit. Have you ever had this situation where somebody proposes a step, a countermeasure, and you have the feeling like, maybe a bit arbitrary, maybe quick firefighting? Don't ask, are you sure this is the right step? Answer will always be yes. Instead, when someone proposes an action that seems arbitrary, ask, what obstacle is this action addressing? Give it a try. Some interesting things will happen. And last, who of you has the feeling that their team or the people they're working with has too many projects on their plate? Then this is for you. When we are about to add a new project to our workload, I will ask, what problem are we solving with this project? If we cannot answer the question, don't start the project. It's hard. All right, so pick one, try it for 2 weeks, tell me how it went. Start tiny. And you know, when we start coaching and practicing for scientific thinking, I've seen it so many times, it's like new doors opening, new doors of opportunity. And people can really outperform the expected. They can outperform what you expect and even what they've expected themselves. All right, so I'm Tilo Schwarz. I'm helping managers to practice and coach scientific thinking so they can give wings to their team, outperform the expected, and make work more fun. How do we do it? Well, I'm also the founder of the coaching dojo, where managers and coaches practice how they become better coaches. Jeff is here now. We've written a book together. If you have a taste for a bit more of coaching, you can look into that. And I really encourage you, and I can tell you, your team can do it. Your team can do it. They need you to start the journey. Give wings to your team. Thank you very much. Can we...
There he is.
Oh yeah, there he is. Hi, Jeff.
Hi.
Good to see you.
You too?
Did you hear any of my presentation?
I heard it all.
Okay. Too much? No.
That was good, very good.
Here's
Reminded me of a TED Talk.
Jeff. When we think about developing speed of learning organization, in your experience, your research, what you've seen, what do you think is the role of managers in developing a learning organization?
Well, I'll just talk from the point of view of Toyota, which is not an average company, but one of the interesting things in Toyota is that if you go into a manufacturing plant, most of the middle managers who have titles like section manager or manager, and even often general managers, when they go through their history, it started that they were a worker on the shop floor, and then they became a team leader, then a group leader, then a manager. When you're a team member, you are in a Toyota manufacturing plant, you're expected to follow the standardized work, you're expected to pull the cord when you see a problem, and you're expected to participate and contribute your ideas to Kaizen. And then some of those workers, and all the workers are asked to participate in what's called quality circles, where they'll work for months on problem solving, starting with defining the problem and going through 6 steps. And I do a master class in lean leadership in the United Kingdom plant, and there everybody must participate. And it's 6 months, a 6-month project and a 6-month project. Every 6 months is a new project. The person who's either leading or coaching the team member leading is called a team leader, and they are responding to the andon, and they have a lot of leadership responsibilities, mostly focused on improvement. They have their own project they're working on with an A3, and they're expected to coach the team members, particularly through quality circles. And then the team members, the team leaders, then become group leaders. That's the first line of supervision. So they're like the supervisor, frontline supervisor. And the team leaders have to go through about a 4-month training process with a lot of problem-solving training to become a group leader, and then it keeps going from there. The point is, and it takes, to become a group leader from when you join the company as a production worker, takes 8 to 10 years. So that entire time, you're being coached. The group leader is expected to spend 50% of their time coaching. So you're being coached, and you've been part of quality circles, you've led quality circles, you've worked on your own projects. So it's like constant problem-solving training for years and years and years. Eventually, if you were to become a manager, general manager, you might have been there for 15 to 20 years, and you've had constant training. And Toyota distinguishes between problem-solving and on-the-job development. And on-the-job development is like the coaching kata, and the problem-solving is like the improvement kata. And you learn through how to do OJD by having a coach who coaches you while you're coaching the person usually who reports to you. So that has led, there's a similar structure in engineering. So that has led to everybody who's at a managerial level having many, many years of problem solving and coaching others in problem solving. That was codified in the Toyota Way 2001 as the role of the manager, which was to work toward big challenges through Kaizen, and Kaizen is many cycles of PDCA, rapid PDCA, to experiment and find your way to the challenge, and do that at the Gemba. And then the way that was put in practice was through what's called Toyota Business Practices, which is kind of like Mike Rother's improvement kata model. And everybody starting at the top, who was an executive vice president, had to be coached and do a TBP, which usually took about 8 months. Then they had to coach the next level and the next level and the next level. And that was cascaded down the company. Even though everybody had gotten problem-solving training, that was formally cascaded down the company. It took about 8 years to get to the group leader level, and they're still doing it. If you want to get a promotion, and you're up for a promotion, you have to do a TBP project to prove you can do it in the area that you're going to be promoted to. So that's just their life, is problem-solving and coaching, and they don't need to have a storyboard, and they don't need to have somebody coming from the outside and say, do kata. It's just what they've been doing from the day they joined the company.
Hi, Jeff. So basically...
I think your mic is off. Is that...
He's turning it off because I'm coughing.
Ah.
Very smart. Basically, you're practicing from the day you start at Toyota. So by the time you become a manager, you've internalized through a variety of practices. You've internalized the mindset, the habit. Tilo was talking about habits and thinking patterns. So basically, it starts at the beginning, and you just keep at it your whole career.
Wait, he can't hear you.
This mic is messed up.
No, it's not your mic. Thanks. Yeah.
All right. Hi, Jeff.
Hi. First time I heard you speak German, you seem like a different person.
Yeah. You don't usually. It's a secret I've kept. So just to comment on what you said, it sounds like the question is, what's the role of managers in developing a learning organization? And then you've basically pointed out that the day you hire in at Toyota, you start practicing, and that continues on through your entire career. And by the time you get to be a manager, you've internalized what Tilo's calling habits and thinking patterns.
Right, so you don't have to unlearn bad habits because you've gotten pretty good habits from the start.
I like that. Don't have to unlearn habits. You get the right habits from the start.
So, listening to you, Jeff, you've worked with a lot of managers outside Toyota. You mentioned your masterclass you do in the UK. What did you learn from that? I mean, in different, I get it, this is what Toyota's doing, but how can we do it?
Yeah, so in the masterclass in the UK, we spend 2 days in the Toyota plant, and there's presentations, we go to the floor, we see Kaizen examples, and the managers answer questions. And what the participants get, what comes across very clearly is the human side, the people side of Lean, and particularly training and problem solving and the coaching and all that I've talked about. So they get that cognitively. I do the Mike Rother's puzzle exercise to illustrate kata, and I make it clear that the point of the exercise is to teach the steps of the kata and not to get really good at making the puzzles fast. It's a 15-piece child's puzzle. So I make that clear, and then we go through the steps of the kata, of setting target conditions, understanding the current condition, experimenting, asking, what do you expect will happen? What did you learn? And I could barely get these guys to stop trying to jump to solutions and work on the puzzle itself. So they start to discuss how they're going to divide the work, and then I ask them, all right, now you've done baseline, you've done a couple of baselines. What is your current condition? I give them instructions on how to look for the current condition and write it down on the storyboard. And they're still talking about how we're going to improve the speed of the puzzle. And I got to the point where I bought a whistle, a gym teacher whistle, so I could blow the whistle to get them to stop what they're doing and stop jumping to solutions and trying to speed ahead to the fastest time in the room, and actually do what I asked them to do, which was the current conditions, set a target condition, all the steps of the kata. So then at the end, I asked them what they learned, and some of them get it, that, you know, the whole goal was to learn the kata, and they weren't really interested in the kata. They were interested in getting the best time on the puzzle. And I sometimes get a little sarcastic. I said, look, you're paying a lot of money, and you're all high-level executives and global leaders in lean, so I assume the reason you came here is because you wanted to get really good at building a child's puzzle, right? And, you know, they kind of laugh. Anyway, I introduced scientific thinking kata throughout the course quite a bit. And at the end, they put together a mind map of a desired future for their company. And they always mention coaching, and that's probably the most critical thing they learn is the importance of coaching. What I'm not sure of is if they really get it. You know, if they're going to go back and they're going to start practicing something different than they did before the course. And I have no way of knowing whether I haven't tried to find out and study whether they change or not, but it concerns me a bit because in the puzzle exercise, they clearly are not changing their behavior. And some of them, when I ask them what you learned, will raise their hand and say, you know, we were so preoccupied with winning the game, we forgot that we're here to learn about scientific thinking and kata. And other people don't seem to get it. So it's not an easy thing, as you've demonstrated with your few exercises. It's not an easy thing to change behavior. It's an easy thing to intellectually realize coaching is important, which is different than doing it.
I think it's also hard to realize that coaching, or difficult to realize that coaching is a skill like any other to be practiced. And sometimes the managers think they're already coaches.
Right. So I think that also comes across, that they're thinking all these other people who work for them have to learn this. But if they're a global director of lean, obviously they do not have to, they think.
It's a fundamental human attribute that we don't know what we don't know. And, you know, another professor at the University of Michigan, where Jeff is right now, is Professor Dunning, and he came up with the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is showing that when you're a beginner, you don't realize how bad you are. You're kind of overconfident. You, like Jeff said, you get it cognitively. And you're like, oh, I've got this. And how many times have people practiced a skill, whatever it is, coaching or something else, and later said, gosh, I thought I was so good, I was terrible. I realize now how bad I was and how far I have to go. So not only do you get it cognitively, but you think you're already pretty good at it, and you're not. All of us.
I think that's what Toyota figured out when they developed on-the-job development and when they talk about learning by doing. And then when Fujio Cho developed the Toyota Way 2001 and they did training for that, he realized it was only intellectual training. So then he introduced Toyota business practices as a way to put the Toyota Way into practice, into action. And the Toyota Way business practices training is a few days of classroom training and then 8 months of on-the-job learning by doing.
Tilo, do we want to take some questions from the audience?
Sure, I was just thinking about, the Toyota Way 2 with the scientific thinking in the middle and wondering, I mean, I guess many of you are familiar with Jeff's book, The Toyota Way, and what I found very interesting, Jeff, in your second edition, you could say it's a rework because you changed so many things. You put scientific thinking in the middle of the model, of the 4P model. What made you add that to the middle of the model?
Mike did it. We had many talks, many coffee conversations after the Toyota Kata came out, but we gave a presentation at a conference at one of the Katacon conferences, and Mike was celebrating 15 years, I think, of Toyota Kata, and I was celebrating 20 years of the Toyota Way. And we had been talking about, we made a presentation together, we were talking about where Kata fits in to the Toyota Way model, philosophy, processes, people, and problem solving. And we ended up concluding the presentation with the Toyota Way and Kata play well together. In other words, they're not contradicting each other. They fit together in some way, and each makes sense, and together they make a whole story. Anyway, so I think that I started thinking on the way home that was kind of a cop-out to just say they play well together. It's just like saying Toyota Kata plays well with DMAIC and Six Sigma, or with Toyota business practices. I started thinking there's got to be more to it, and then I started thinking about the 4 Ps, and I thought about philosophy, which is about long-term systems thinking, and Toyota is absolutely, and people in Toyota are absolutely convinced and believe in their heart that the Toyota production system is a system, and all the parts that are interacting. You can't pull out one part and do it by itself and cherry pick and get a lot. So there's a way of thinking in the philosophy, which is a type of scientific thinking. And then Mike has pointed out that our lean processes, we often think of as an independent variable. You do standardized work in order to get productivity. You do Kanban in order to get less inventory. Whereas in Toyota, they think of this as part of a system for one thing, but also as an outcome of a process. So you do a bunch of things and solve a bunch of problems and do a lot of experiments in order to achieve one-piece flow. You don't really ever achieve it, and you don't ever achieve perfect pull or perfect leveling, but that gives you a direction. And then I thought, and then obviously the problem-solving P can be interpreted as your first model, Tilo, of we're trying to just get to the goal as fast as possible, and we take a direct path, versus we experiment and we're right sometimes and wrong sometimes. And it's clear that in the way that Toyota practices and is coached, it's experiment, 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 and the expectation is that you're going to be wrong sometimes and right sometimes, and you're wrong, you need to learn from that as well. And then the people are developed to think scientifically. So what I realized is that you can't do any of the 4 Ps without scientific thinking. So that led me to, that was a major reason why I wanted to do the second edition and why I put scientific thinking in the center.
Cool.
Yeah, and the interesting realization is, in hindsight, is that, of course, a way of thinking is not visible. So if you walk into Toyota, which we did many times, which many of you have done, you know, you see things, we read books and so forth, all the visible stuff, but there's something that was not visible, a way of thinking, which is actually an enabler for the things that you see. So that's like saying plays well with, right? So if you do A3 or Kaizen workshops or single-piece flow cells or whatever, scientific thinking fits with all of that. So it is a little frustrating to me, Jeff, to see how, and I think it's normal, it's not a criticism, but it's frustrating to see how something like Toyota Kata comes out and it's like, oh, now we have to do this, and we're going to stop doing something else, right? So it's been, I think it's my mistake for not communicating it properly by saying this is like an additional ingredient, something that was invisible that makes the other stuff work better. And the aha moment for me, or one of the aha moments for me, was when we saw that a lot of the lean tools are actually target conditions. And we were trying to implement Heijunka to make something better. And they were using Heijunka as a goal. And we said, oh, we tried Heijunka, it didn't work. And they said, right, it doesn't work right at the beginning, that's correct. So then what did you do? And we said, no, it didn't work, we stopped. You know, and they said, oh, that's not how we do it. And so for them, it's a goal, it's a target condition, and then you engage your scientific thinking process to try to pursue that goal. And by the way, as Marie said earlier, it's the same, I think it was Marie, yeah, how we proceed at Toyota, it's the same. So Jeff was saying, your entire career you're practicing, You're practicing a way, it's a meta way of achieving goals or solving problems. So if the problem is we need to make this Hejunka system work, or we need to find some employees to do this, or whatever the problem is, you've practiced the same basic scientific pattern. They would like you to approach that scientifically. So it's like a catalyst, or as Katie Anderson calls, a catalyst.
Yeah, so just add to that, the statement, it plays well with others, or it plays well with Six Sigma, or it plays well with A3. I think a better way of thinking about it, forget about the kata, but think about scientific thinking, is that you can use any of these problem-solving tools in a scientific way or not. So you can either try to jump to solutions or think, for example, in DMAIC, that you're going to do enough analysis of data that the absolute one best way will pop out before you actually do anything, before you implement anything. And then when you implement, you're just verifying what you think you already know. Or you can think of the implementation step of DMAIC as being experimenting and testing the hypotheses you developed in your analysis. So there are two different ways of looking at things. And I think the meta skill idea, Mike, where you say that underlying the way you approach A3, underlying the way you approach DMAIC, underlying the way you approach introducing Hejunka or trying to achieve Hejunka, try to achieve a leveled process. The underlying way of thinking is the same way of thinking, which is scientific thinking.
I think to kind of what it reminds me of, Jeff, is something you once mentioned in our conversations, which is at Toyota, there's never the tool without the coach. And I at least can say for myself, we've often copied the tool, like in A3, but we haven't added the coaching that kind of ensures the scientific way of thinking. But maybe we can have some questions. I was just wondering, what's on your mind regarding habits, scientific thinking, and managers as coaches? There's somebody in the back there. Good, thank you.
Talk a bit louder, that's it. Thanks for you to be here. So it's great to meet the heroes that I have for quite some time in person. So just that on a side note. So, and the other thing, I was hoping to get a little bit of clarification in the word of coach and coaching, because especially here in Germany, for the past few years, we had some kind of coming up or maybe a different interpretation of what coaching means. Like, okay, the coachee is free to choose. We're only supposed to ask questions, and wherever the coachee goes, it's always the right thing. So, but I reckon this is not the coaching that you had in mind. Am I right?
Yes. So I want to be very careful here because we often tend to think in right and wrong, okay? So two quick thoughts. So one is, I think of coaching as like a pie with different slices, different coaching approaches, and they all have their place. There's business coaching, career coaching, sports coaching, systemic coaching, and then we're talking about one slice of the pie. Now, what I think is special about the coaching we are talking about is this. All coaching approaches, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think all coaching approaches aim at helping a person or team to solve a problem or reach a goal. Coaching kata does that too, the coaching we're talking about here. The difference is that the coaching we're talking about here has a second purpose, and that is developing a more scientific way of thinking so the person or team we're coaching can achieve even more challenging goals and greater things in the future. So this is why this is not completely open. Where you could say we're coaching for achieving a specific goal and teaching a way of how to do it on the meta level, okay? This doesn't mean that all the other coaching approaches are wrong. It's a matter of what is your purpose. The second thing I'd like to add here is that, yes, I know, and I've done myself, we've been talking about coaching and managers as coaches in organizations for many years now. So I think, number one, the problem is not that we, as managers, and I can speak for myself in the past, that we don't know that we should be coaches. We know we should coach our teams. Number two, I think for most of us, it's not the case that we don't want to coach. Also, we've had some coaching and communication training in the past. The real struggle is the everyday management work. Somebody steps in your office and says, I have a problem. And you have 21, 22, 23 to make a decision if you tell the person what to do or if you coach. And that is so hard. And that is what you were talking about, Mike, that coaching is a skill. And a skill does not develop by what goes through our ear, but through the practice. And that is my passion. How can we help managers and coaches to become better in everyday coaching? Because I know it's so hard. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'd like to add to that the question about what is a coach and this idea that the coaching kata card is a set of questions. So one implication is don't tell anybody anything, just ask questions. And I was thinking about like sports coaching, like I've played golf and I've had golf lessons, and what they're teaching is a physical process, swinging a club to hit a ball. Still, if my golf coach spent too much time lecturing me about what I should be doing, very quickly it's not productive. So I want them, the good coaches will tell you very little, and then they'll say, hit the ball. And then they'll give you corrective feedback and say, hit the ball this way and aim here and try to hit the ground here. And there's a bunch of tricks and a bunch of exercises, or what you call kata, to get me to swing the club in the right way. I'm still swinging the club. It's not so useful for me to watch somebody else swinging the club. In our case, we're talking about a way of thinking, which is different than a physical skill. So I'm not able to practice hitting something. I have to practice a way of thinking, and you have to be able to observe it. So we have the steps of the kata, where I actually define the target condition, and you can listen to me. But I think maybe for learning an intellectual task, you need more questions and less direction. And maybe for a physical task, my golf coach knows what I should be doing physically and could give me more physical direction. I'm not sure, but certainly there is a body of knowledge within our threshold of knowledge. And I was talking to the people at Toyota who teach the Toyota production system and ask them, do you only ask questions? And they say, obviously not. There's things that we know that we have to pass on, like how to set up a Kanban system. We're going to give them some content knowledge, but then we want them to do it. And we also want them to fail to do it so that they could learn from their mistakes. So there's some combination of telling and asking questions, usually, but we'd like to do the telling in little bite-sized chunks, immediately followed by the student practicing.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, so we're back to thinking is invisible, like I was saying a minute ago, right? We didn't see it right away. We saw the visible tools. So like Jeff says, if you want to coach something physical, you say, well, do it. Let me watch you, and I'll correct your posture or whatever it is. But with thinking, you have to ask a question, and only when the learner responds can you see, now I see how they're thinking. And then you, as a coach, have to make a decision. Do I just let them go with their thought? And I think their thought is wrong, but they will discover very quickly that they made a mistake, and so as Jeff said, they'll be learning from their mistake. Or is the mistake that might occur because of the way you see them currently thinking going to have ramifications? It's going to cause a quality problem, or someone could get hurt or whatever. Then the coach might be more directive. So it's not always it's not Socratic in that sense. You're just always asking questions and the learner is always right. But you have to ask the question to see how they're thinking, and then once you see their thinking, you decide what they're ready for next. And it was a Toyota coach who told me that the hardest part of his job was understanding what their learner was ready for next. I have to pay very close attention to my learner, and each learner is different, and then I have to decide after they've said what they want to do next, okay, what do they need to learn next? Do I let them go? Do I steer something in? What's the next kind of problem I should give them? That kind of thing. I think being a coach is the harder job. You really, as Jeff said, you have to kind of constrain yourself. And I think this coaching model is, I apologize, somewhat inconsistent with consulting. As Jeff said, you give just a little bit of advice. And those times that I've done consulting, I'm not going to be back there for another month, right? So I would try to give you a list of, okay, do this, do this, do this, do this. That's not a little bit. That's a whole bunch of action items. Whereas if the coach is there every day, then you can say, well, just do this. Just do this one thing, and then tomorrow we'll see what happened. Or maybe in an hour we'll see what happened. It almost makes it so that the manager has to be the coach. It has to be someone there. And as Tilo said, the manager is affecting how probably one of the largest effects on the employee, on the associate's mindset, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Good. You had something in mind.
Yes. What you also described, I think there's a bit of training within that, physical stuff, training, teaching, and the challenge might be to know when to step in which role. The role of a trainer, a teacher, or the role of a coach.
Jeff,
And
you should know
maybe that's in English language.
language.
Coach is both of them.
Yeah.
In German, we have teacher, we have trainer, and we have coaches.
So, Jeff, the sports coach you see on television in German is called a trainer. And I think if you say the word coach in German, it's a little bit different than a trainer. It's probably more that softer, just ask Socratic questions.
And Götz, that's another reason. Yes, it is difficult. On the other hand, don't overthink it. That's another reason why I started to think more in these tiny coaching habits. They're not only for your team, they're also for yourself to learn about these situations and how to react. Because we're always both learning. Further questions? I think we still have 9 minutes is what the timer says. Can you hand the microphone over there?
Thank you very much, I got. So,
To check.
for the speakers, it's a great honor to hear you. For me, it's a question, when you come to a new plant, and because I'm coming from a typical German mid-sized company for automotive supplier, so you come into a new plant, what you do first? So what is your real first day? What is it about? And where you start? Can you start directly with coaching, or do you do something different?
Jeff, I'll let you handle that. I don't really go anymore.
Okay. Well, I just did a course, one of these master classes with people from Toyota. It's called the Toyota Production System Support Center, TSSC. And all they do is go into companies fresh and try to teach them TPS. And they do it a lot more than I do. Their approach is only one approach, which is a model line, they call it. So they first go and talk to the CEO or the COO, the highest level person they can, and they ask the CEO what are their biggest problems in achieving their goals, and they, based on that, they identify one plant in the company that has a serious problem. Let's say that it's late shipments because of all sorts of reasons like quality issues, and one plant is the worst in having late shipments. They would say, we will start there. And what they start with is a model line, which could be a value stream, it could be a part of a value stream, it's generally not one machine, it's a series of connected machines. And then they identify it, as Mike Rother has in the improvement card, they identify a challenge, and then they specifically request certain types of people, like we want 1 or 2 people who are up-and-comers who could become your future lean champions, and we want the supervisor, and we want the area manager, and we want, say, industrial engineers. They get a team together, and then that's the team they're going to coach. And the way they coach is by giving them assignments, and one of the assignments, and they call it homework. The first assignment is going to have to do with grasping the current condition. So this is the challenge. What is the current condition? And they might share with them a few tools they can use to, like a spaghetti diagram, if they've never done anything like that before, to understand the walking patterns of people's. Depending on the situation, they'll give them different tools. And then they will say, I'll be back in 2 days to see what you learned. So it ends up looking a lot like the improvement kata process. Now, there's certain cases I mentioned, for example, Kanban. If it becomes clear that the next problem they have is they have too much material in being delivered to them, and it's not the right material, and then they might ask, what would you like to have happen? And they might say, I'd like them to bring just what I need next. And then at that point, they would teach them about Kanban, for example, and they'd have to do a little bit of teaching. But it's up to them, the people in the plant, to design the Kanban cards, design the supermarket, and all that. So it's, like I said, it's a combination of some telling and some instruction, but I call it just-in-time training, where you're just giving them what they need just in time to perform the next task. And that has been taking in the United States somewhere between 6 months to a year to develop that model line. They also insist that they introduce in the model area the team leader role, because they think that's so critical to responding to problems and doing Kaizen every day on the next problem that comes up. And they teach problem solving from, actually they didn't used to, but now they teach problem solving at the very beginning. So it's the one thing that they will teach, like it's a course, is they'll teach problem solving, because they want them to use the problem solving approach as they develop the model line. Now, at some point, if it's a 1-year model line, it doesn't mean they don't do anything else for a year. At some point, the company's going to want to introduce another model line in another plant, or maybe introduce some of the tools in other parts of the plant, and that's fine, as long as the team for the model line that's working on the model line stays together and continues to develop the model line as a total system, so you can see the whole Toyota production system working. So that's what they do.
I think it's an interesting question. Where do you start? Okay, and I think it's a question that can illuminate something, and it's a little bit like Marie's point that you practice a pattern which you then can apply to anything. So you come in and you're trying to improve something, you're trying to achieve something. There's a tangible thing you're working on. Those are lean tools or whatever. But when you come in, if you're thinking about how they're thinking, they have a goal, you have a goal, and your goal is that they think a certain way. So it's pretty clear what you do when you come in. You go, okay, I have to figure out, I have in my mind a scientific way of thinking. The way of thinking, there are different styles and whatever, but there's a basic pattern. I have in my mind a scientific thinking pattern that these people should be using. Okay, what's the next step? What's the next thing you have to figure out? Where are they now?
Exactly.
How are they currently thinking? And you do that while you're working on something. And it almost doesn't matter what it is. It's some goal, some problem, it's a model line or whatever. But do you see what I mean? You come in and you're walking in from the parking lot and you say, okay, we're going to be working on something that my eyes can see, some lean tool. But I have to remind myself, my job, your job, as a manager, as a leader, is to say, how are they approaching this? How are they thinking? I need to quickly see how they're thinking. And then you think about what's the next target condition for their development?
Yeah.
What's the next thing? Where do I want to get them next? And what people call this is kata the kata. You're applying the improvement kata pattern to deploying the improvement kata pattern. And as Marie said, it's so cool. It's the same basic pattern. In this case, the problem you're solving is somebody's thinking.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, so the Toyota people have two goals. One is they want to teach what they call problem solving, which you call scientific thinking. So they want to teach that. That's a very important goal. It's way up there. They also want to teach the Toyota production system. That's their main job, is to teach the Toyota production system as a system. So that's why they pick the model line, is they don't want them to work on like isolated projects here and there. They want them to coherently build a system.
I think we have one more question there. Sorry for.
That's a good point, Jeff.
Yeah. First of all, thank you for this great learning experience. I have a question in regards to the future of Lean. Because we see today, let me start another way. In the past, Lean was developed basically to improve manufacturing. But in the future, our physical products will include more and more software, and it will be a combination of physical products and software. Does the lean methodology has to adapt to this situation, or can you copy one-on-one the same methods also for products that include more and more software?
I think that matches well with what Mike just mentioned before, where he talked about the lean tools are more like a target condition, or you could also say they are like a starting point. So I think any kind of implementation can be lean, can be agile, whatever it is. The tools always just provide a starting point, and then it's always a learning journey. That's why I'm very optimistic about the future if we see lean as a starting point and not as a finishing line. And if we combine it with a scientific way of thinking and make it a learning journey, we will find out what we need to adapt to make it match. Will we have to adapt it? Of course. I've never seen something, I mean, when we did benchmark trips to Japan, of course, I came back as a plant manager and I had a lot of ideas in my mind. My team was probably super afraid. What is he going to come back with? Did it match our situation? No, I just thought it was a great idea. So I've never seen an implementation that matches from the start. There's always learning and adapting. And I think if we see it that way, it's a matter of seeing kind of the mindset we use. We can adapt it to everything, to every situation where we need it.
I think it's a good question. Thanks for asking it. I think the fact that we need to adapt it in our minds from manufacturing, kind of the place it came from, is Marie's point. And why they call it I don't know the word very well, monozukuri, right? Because I think if you say monozukuri, then your question is at least partially answered. It's not about manufacturing, right? It's about earning your way by making something, whatever it is you do, service for the customer, software, or whatever. So partly, I think your question points to the fact that we've misinterpreted lean. And the other part of the answer is, you know, I'm interested in a portion of lean, which is the scientific thinking portion. I'm not interested in all of lean so much anymore for many years now. The scientific thinking portion is immediately transferable to virtually anything. Try it with your children, it's delightful. And, or in schools, it's really remarkable. But it's a good question.
Yeah, so just to add, you mentioned Agile, and the Agile movement is a software movement. It's not a manufacturing movement. It's been going on for probably about 20 years. And it was actually based on the Toyota production system. What had bothered me from the beginning, because I've also studied Toyota's product development system and engineering, and I have a couple of books on product development. And product development in Toyota is different than TPS in manufacturing, but there are a set of methods and tools and ways of thinking in product development that are also based on scientific thinking. And what bothered me is that that software is more like a product development process. It's a knowledge work process, but yet the Agile people tried to copy manufacturing and start with that as a base. So they had something like Scrumban because Toyota has Kanban, and they have daily huddles because you see daily huddles on the shop floor. So I always thought a better starting point would have been the product development system, but recently there's been a lot of interest in the Agile world of software development in Kata, and we have a colleague, Joel Krebs, who just published a book called Agile Kata, and they're facing really the same issue as the lean folks, which is kind of a decline in interest, and they haven't had the impact they'd like to have, and they haven't had sustainable impacts they'd like to have, and they're looking at scientific thinking as a way of making this sustainable and also getting to the way of thinking, not just the tools. I used to call Agile Post-it note heaven. If you can write something on a Post-it note, you could do Agile, but it's getting a lot more sophisticated now.
All right.
Okay.
I think that's a good finishing point.
That's right. So Good. Maybe I pick up a question, a remarkable question Ralph put on some minutes ago. So, do you think we had an event like this in Germany in the last 20, 30 years?
Are you asking me?
No. I'm also asking the audit. What do you think? Maybe this is an applause.
Well, at least I can't think of a similar situation. Well, so for that, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jeff.
Thank you very much for joining us. Mike, thank you very much for coming along. Götz, thank you very much.
See you later, Jeff.
Und ich denke, für den Übergang zur Party hat mir neulich jemand, Verbesserungskata dürfte den meisten bekannt sein, die 4 Schritte der Verbesserungskata, ne? Also Challenge, Current Condition, Next Target Condition, Experiment. Und jemand hat mir neulich erklärt, ich kriege das noch nicht hin, wie das auf Bayerisch geht. Das war irgendwie, wo willst du hin, wo kommst du her und wo gibt es die nächste halbe? Und ich denke, das ist ein wunderbarer Übergang zur Networking Party.
Thanks.